Title: AITA for inheriting everything and telling my family to get lost. Alright, so here's the situation. I, 20M, was raised by my grandpa after my parents died in a car accident when I was really young. I don't remember much about them. It's like my life started with grandpa. He wasn't rich or famous. He was a retired mechanic who lived in a small house on a decent chunk of farmland. He was a bit quirky, but he was a good man who did his best to raise me. Grandpa owned about 100 acres of farmland. The land itself wasn't anything fancy, just rolling fields with some old equipment lying around, but it was worth a decent amount, around $600,000, give or take. Grandpa never really farmed the land. He rented it out to local farmers, and that money kept us afloat. He made sure I had what I needed growing up, and even though we weren't rolling in cash, we got by just fine. My uncles and aunts. They were pretty much non-existent in my life. They lived in big cities, had fancy jobs, and never bothered with grandpa. They never visited, called, or even sent a card on his birthday. It was like they'd completely forgotten about him. And honestly, I was okay with that. They were basically strangers to me. When I graduated high school 3 years ago, I had plans to go to college, but that all changed when grandpa got sick. He was diagnosed with cancer, and it hit him hard. Suddenly, I was faced with a choice: go to college and leave grandpa to fend for himself or stay home and take care of him. For me, it wasn't really a choice. I couldn't just leave him, so I stayed. I picked up odd jobs to pay the bills and took care of grandpa full-time. It wasn't easy, but I loved him, and I knew he needed me. The last 3 years were tough. Watching grandpa get weaker every day was brutal, but I did what I could to make him comfortable. I took him to all his doctor's appointments, made sure he took his meds, and just tried to be there for him. My uncles and aunts. Still MIA. Not a single visit, not even a phone call to see how he was doing. It pissed me off, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. Grandpa needed me, and that was all that mattered. A few months ago, grandpa passed away. He went peacefully in his sleep, but it was still a huge blow. The house felt so empty without him, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I handled the funeral arrangements alone, and it was a small service, just a few neighbors and me. My uncles and aunts didn't even bother to show up. They sent some cheap, generic flowers, like that was supposed to mean something. Then came the will. I wasn't expecting much because, like I said, we didn't have a lot. But when the lawyer read the will, I was stunned. Grandpa left everything to me: his house, his savings, his old truck, and all 100 acres of farmland. The whole lot was worth around $600,000, which blew my mind. My uncles and aunts were furious when they found out. They started blowing up my phone, yelling about how unfair it was, how they deserved a share, and accusing me of manipulating grandpa into leaving them out of the will. The hypocrisy was unreal. They hadn't lifted a finger to help him, hadn't even bothered to visit when he was dying, but now they wanted his money. It wasn't long before they decided to confront me in person. Unlike before, this time they gave me a heads up that they were coming. They didn't ask, they just told me they were coming to discuss the will. I knew it was going to be ugly, but I wasn't about to back down. When they arrived, it was like a storm had rolled in. All three of them, my 2 uncles and my aunt, showed up at the same time, each one looking more pissed off than the last. They didn't even bother with small talk. They barged right in, like they owned the place, and started throwing accusations at me. It was intense. They said I'd taken advantage of grandpa, that I'd isolated him from the rest of the family, that I'd tricked him into leaving everything to me. They even suggested I'd forged the will. The whole thing was insane. I tried to stay calm at first, but it wasn't long before I lost it. I mean, who the hell did they think they were? Where were they when grandpa was sick? Where were they when he was lying in bed, too weak to even get up? I was the one who was there, taking care of him, making sure he was comfortable, while they were off living their lives without a care in the world. And now they wanted to swoop in and take everything he left me. Not a chance. The more they pushed, the more I realized I wasn't going to be able to reason with them. So, I did what I had to do. I told them if they didn't leave, I'd call the cops. That shut them up pretty quick. One of my uncles tried to get in my face, still thinking he could intimidate me, but I stood my ground. I told him, This is my house now. Grandpa left it to me because he knew I was the only one who cared. You're not getting a penny, and if you don't get out, I'll have the police drag you out. They threw out a few more threats as they left, but they knew they'd lost. They didn't have a leg to stand on, and they knew it. I haven't heard from them since, and I don't really care if I ever do. Now that everything's settled, I've been thinking about what's next. I'm planning on finally going to college, something I put off to take care of Grandpa. I've got enough from the inheritance to cover my tuition and living expenses, so I'm ready to start a new chapter in my life. It's weird not having Grandpa around, but I know he'd want me to move forward and make something of myself. So, Reddit, AITA for inheriting everything and telling my family to get lost.
For part 2, please like and subscribe this video and hit the bell icon.